Rick Lane is a Washington, D.C. based policy strategist and tech policy specialist. He currently serves as founder and CEO of Iggy Ventures, a consulting investment advisory outfit, I guess you could call it, that focuses on tech, child safety, online public policy initiatives, and related ventures. When the Warriors want to understand how big tech works, who's pulling the strings, and how we can fight back to protect our kids online, we go to Rick. We're talking about algorithms that prey on children, platforms that profit from addiction, and policies written by lobbyists, perhaps, instead of parents. Rick Lane helps us decode it, the fine print, the loopholes, the politics, and the power plays, and what needs to be done. Because protecting kids in the digital age isn't about fear. It is about knowledge, and that's what Rick provides. So please follow Rick Lane on LinkedIn at Rick Lane. And I'm going to say, Rick, welcome back to the Warriors.
Well, thank you for having me back. I always enjoy our conversations.
Oh, well, but we really do depend on you for giving us the kind of nitty gritty. I'm going to answer any way you see fit, Rick, with this one. But you have spent years in the trenches in Capitol Hill, right? From your view right now, what's the real mood in Washington as far as child safety online? Is it genuine urgency, or do you think political theater? Because we can both agree that all of this child safety, online, real time, all of it is a bipartisan issue. It belongs to no political party. It's about human rights abuses, parents and kids. So what would your answer or thoughts on this one be?
I think we are at the most strongest point in our efforts than we've been in the history of child safety. I think we have the other side on the run. You can tell by the amount of money they're spending to try to fight us, hundreds of millions of dollars, both in the states, at the federal level and internationally. And they constantly are changing their policies to try to fend off the legislation that we are pushing and moving. I think the real push by moms, to be specific, over the past couple of years have really made the difference. And that push needs to continue. It gets frustrating at times because of what happened last session with COSA, but I'd rather be where we are than where big tech is.
Yeah, absolutely. And here I'm in New York, Rick, as you know, we have a lot of dads as parents stepping up, either with, their wives or even alone to start really talking about these issues, especially with their sons, which I think is so important that, adult male with the teen boy, the boys as well. So you mentioned COSA, Kids Online Safety Act. So let's go there because it keeps getting stalled and rewritten. What's going on with that? Who's blocking it? And why is big tech? Oh, well, again, Rick, answer any way you see fit, but I got to ask these questions. Do we think big tech is really on the Hill rewriting this bill, stalling it, incentive? I mean, what's going on with this?
Yeah, I mean, they're fearful right now. I mean, in the Washington offices of these big tech companies, COSA and any legislation that provides duty of care is a threat, and their jobs depend on it. And so they are pushing hard. They're trying to make changes. They feel that they are under the gun by pressure from members of Congress to try to figure this out. But no one is buying their rhetoric anymore. No one's buying their excuses. The evidence is becoming overwhelming about the harm to children of these social media platforms, the chatbots, the AI companions, all these things. It's no longer easy for them and members of Congress to ignore.
Yeah, I feel bad, Rick, because I'm making you speak with your allergies, but we are warriors. So so please feel free to take a drink of water. I'm not letting you go once I have you on the Warriors. So just take a drink of water, whatever you got to do there.
Thank you.
A Luden's cough drop, whatever you have handy, because we're going to keep going on this one.
Okay.
Sounds a little mean, but I gotta keep you going. We got to hear the information and share it with the Warriors. So Senator Hawley's GUARD Act this week.
Yes.
Very, very good news, in my opinion, takes aim. You mentioned the AI, the artificial intelligence chatbots, marketed to minors. Do you think Congress finally understands how dangerous all of this is, these AI companions? Or do you think our lawmakers truly still have their heads in the sand, and they're not really waking up to everything going on?
I think the hearings that have been held in the Senate have really shined a light on what is happening out there. And as I said before, members can't ignore that. And so they are pushing. I think this legislation, the GUARD Act, has real momentum, and it is dealing with, for the first time, age verification and blocking AI companions from children and teens who are underage. The mental impact of these AI companions that are out there that a lot of parents don't know is devastating. It's scary. And the parents who are speaking, who are unfortunately have been on the forefront of this with their children committing suicide, being led down a dark path by an AI companion, you just can't ignore that. And so I do think that there's a lot of momentum, and they're waking up, and you're seeing more. Now, there's always resistance on these things that come from a variety of areas, but I think that watching what's happening on the Hill, it's a game changer at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know you're in the thick of it. So we're on the same page with this. Explain, Rick, for our warriors listening, exactly what an AI chatbot or a companion is, so they have a full understanding. Because every time I'm bringing it up lately, they don't understand, or they'll say to me, "Oh, you mean it's a robot?" They don't have a full, they just don't really get it. And who could blame them? There's so much going on, right? They don't have time to be watching and listening to everything. But explain for them exactly what we're talking about.
Sure. The analogy I like to use for us, our older generation, is Teddy Ruxpin.
Speak for yourself over there.
My generation. Teddy Ruxpin, which was an animated bear that was brought out in the mid 80s, that was a huge success. And basically what it did is it had a cassette in its back, and it would tell stories, but the eyes would move and the mouth would move. And it was like, and kids loved it because they felt like their teddy bear was talking to them. And imagine that type of technology, but in the back of the teddy bear, and in the eyes are cameras, the mouth is a speaker and a microphone, and the ability for the bear to actually engage with that child in real time with emotions, and having a discussion with that child on topics that parents maybe would not want their child to have, all backed in through AI. And so there was a movie called Ted back in 2000, which was funny, and Seth MacFarlane, but it was about a teddy bear that comes alive. And that teddy bear leads the character down a very bad life decision path, to say the least. And so what I like to say is, so imagine Teddy Ruxpin and Ted combined in the arms of a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. And we all know the emotional attachment that children have with their stuffed animals. And if we've ever left a stuffed animal of our child on a plane, or at the grandparents' house, the trauma that causes for a child. But imagine one that has almost like emotional connection in its conversations and talking back, and in the middle of the night having detailed conversations about sexuality and harm and cutting themselves. That's the future we're in right now. This isn't like science fiction. So a companion AI basically has a dialogue with individuals based on the conversations and feedback. And the real problem with these AI companions is that they always just provide positive reinforcement. I want to kill myself. And it says, oh, well, let me tell you how. Right? So it is very, very scary, not just for teens and younger people, but for adults, to take them down these paths, but in a conversation versus just a bunch of links that take you down a path like has been in the past. So we are at the cusp of losing a generation to a technology that even the creators don't understand exactly how it all works. And that's what's scary. And that's why we need the GUARD Act. That's why we need the AI Lead Act, which creates federal product liability for AI harm. That's why we need the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, to deal with the websites. And that's why we need the No Fakes Act, which is legislation that provides protections for all of us, especially children, if our name, image, and likeness is used in a manner that we have not given consent. So all these bills are really important. The great thing about all of these bills is that they're bipartisan and they have momentum.
Right. Now, Rick, of course, you made my head explode because I just thought of 50 questions for you.
That's okay.
I want to go back on one thing with the Kids Online Safety Act. When we say duty of care, do we know what exactly does that mean? Because I had 3 people yesterday when I was giving a little talk say, I don't understand this duty of care. So I want to make sure I have the correct information. And you're the leader with correct information. So tell us about that.
Well, first of all, I am not a lawyer. So I always want to, though I play one on TV. I've written a lot of bills and legislation, but I can't practice law. But in general, the duty of care is a common law concept, which is the basis of product liability. And so what does that mean? So if I manufacture a product and I know, and I didn't do the right testing, or I know and I did the testing and I knew that there were problems, but I put it into the marketplace anyway, I can be held liable as the company that sold that product and put it into commerce under the duty of care, because I didn't take a duty of care to make sure that the product was safe. And it doesn't mean that you have to test everything a million different ways, because you can always have improvements. So you can't be held liable that, oh, we made improvements. But if you knowingly built a product and put it into the marketplace, knowing that it could create specific harms, then you should be held liable. But under federal law, under Section 230, the courts have interpreted that Section 230 provides liability protection of duty of care. That even if they know that what's happening on their sites is causing harm, they're saying, oh no, that's protected under 230. Now, all the court cases are moving away, because this is what I call, the awful but lawful, so bullying, things that are actual legal speech but are horrible. You cannot legislate against that. They have to take that upon themselves. But I call it conduct versus content. So if if I'm designing my algorithms or my services or products that create addiction, for example, like the tobacco industry, or to create harms, and I know that my design decisions are the cause of that, that's conduct at the corporate level. And that is now being tested in court as not to be shielded by Section 230. And even better is that the authors of Section 230, Senator Wyden and Chris Cox, former Congressman Chris Cox, have stated publicly that they do not believe Section 230 applies to AI. So even the authors are saying that it doesn't apply, but the companies, the AI companies, the big tech companies are still arguing that it does in court.
So, Rick, do you ever, with all of this going on, do you ever see, I know there was some talk, I think there's also a bill on the Hill. I mean, Section 230 is very antiquated. I mean, it doesn't apply. It's what, from 1996? Do you think we'll ever, 30 years, let's say. Do you think, I don't understand it. It's never been amended, right? Really?
Yes, it has, actually.
It has?
FOSTA SESTA, which dealt with sex trafficking.
That's right.
The only time it's been amended.
Yeah, but do you think we'll ever totally get rid of it, this Section 230?
I do think that there is growing interest in what I call sunsetting the bill, in that, and Senator Graham and others, I know that there's a bill out there to sunset. The question is, with the government shutdown, a lot of things have been delayed in terms of introduction. But there is growing momentum to sunset 230, and there are some good parts to 230. Like, for example, what you don't want to have liability is if I'm proactively looking to clean up my site and I find CSAM, for example, or other harm that I want to take down that are detrimental to children, I don't want to be held also become a publisher and be responsible for that content because I proactively found it. What happened with Section 230 and the problem with it is that it also has a provision that if I do nothing to protect people on my site, I can't be held liable. So because there's no duty of care to ensure that the site is safe.
Yeah.
And so that's where we want to make the changes to 230 to create the incentives, which was the initial part of 230, to proactively, clean your site up and take away the bad part, which is if I do nothing or I design my site in a way that's harmful, then I can't be held liable either.
Yeah. Rick, you're so politically correct because I'm like, get rid of it, kick it to the curb, But you're very nicely saying the correct term, which is sunset. I want to just point that out. That is the correct way to say it. Let's go over a little bit. There's a lot of discussion around this age verification. I'm not even 100% clear on it because I do get asked this a lot. Like, how are we going to do this if we provide a government ID that invades privacy? What are you hearing, and how are we going to do all this?
So when I was the point person for MySpace, when News Corp bought MySpace, we had a bunch of AGs, including Attorney General Blumenthal at the time, and now Governor Roy Cooper, who was the AG, and 45 other state AGs asking us to implement age verification. And so we looked at it back then. So this is 2006. And there was no way to really do age verification. We did not have the technological ability to do it. We looked and we tried to figure it out because we wanted to do it because it didn't bother us to do age verification. We just couldn't figure out how, because back then, you could do it for people who were basically 21 and older because they have a credit history. There's mechanisms and they have like public records and things like that for the most part. But for underage people, there's no data, and we didn't want to collect the data of getting school data or school IDs or anything like that. That was problematic. We are now at a point where the technology is in a place where you can do age verification without it being so intrusive. And there are a bunch of companies out there that offer different products and services that allow for age verification. Australia now has age verification, and they've done studies on it, on the different technologies that are out there. The UK has done studies as well. So it is now, because of the technological progress, a viable solution. There's no one size fits all. This idea that somehow, because you're collecting information to verify age, that it's going to be any less protected than all the information that Meta and Instagram and Google and TikTok are collecting on you, which makes me laugh because they're like, oh, it's an invasion of privacy. What about all the information you're collecting off our phones right now? It's kind of a ridiculous argument, or it's not secure. So my argument would be, so all the information you're collecting on me now is not secure. They're red herrings, but it is moving. The other argument was that it was unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court recently said that the age verification, the age gating verification of the Texas, the state law, which dealt with you had to be over 18 to access pornography sites, is constitutionally protected. You can do that. It doesn't violate the First Amendment. So there are some cases as you start going down the area, like on the chat bots and the AI companions, will that be constitutional? Is that a violation of the First Amendment? That is still an unknown. Some can argue yes, some can argue no. There is some precedence on that. There was when the Communications Decency Act came out in '96, it was challenged. There was an Exxon amendment that dealt with filters for libraries and schools and some others. That was struck down under the Reno v. Ashcroft decision. So I think as members are looking at how they draft their own age verification legislation, they need to look at those cases, but I think you can do it in a constitutional way.
Let me ask you something. How would they do it? There was a company, I was at something here in New York fairly recently, and it was something like they would, for age verification, which the state of New Jersey is working on a bill and all that. they were looking at fingerprints and eyeballs or something like that. Is that what we're talking about for age verification?
Well, there's what we call biometrics. So it can be a picture of your face, and they can tell basically your age by how you look. Like there's a lot of data points to create age verification to what age you are. It's not 100%, but nothing is ever going to be 100%. So biometrics is one way to do it. The other way is through other type of ID processes where you have a third party vendor that verifies the age and gives a token. You hear a lot about these tokens that are out there, but a token. So somebody can go from place to place without having to re-verify themselves. So there's a lot of technologies out there, and there's a lot of folks looking into this. The reason that it hasn't grown quickly is because none of the companies wanted to do it. So there was no market. You can't invest millions of dollars into age verification without knowing that there's going to be a market. There's companies like Privo or Privo that's out there, Privo, that has technologies. There's a whole age verification trade association, and they have a bunch of companies. So you can find all these new technologies that are out there and find the one that's right for your your site.
Yeah, and you're saying they're sort of holding back until perhaps laws get passed where they can be then, utilized, and that actually
Yes,
makes sense from a business
and we do
standpoint.
age verification now with gambling, for example. The amount of data, if I want to do legal gaming online, I have to provide a bank account, an ID, and because state taxes and know your customer laws and all that around online, betting. And so there's already that's been happening for a decade in the UK and other places. And then once it became legal here in the States, it's always been a mechanism to know that you're not allowing underage people to gamble. Now, sometimes people get around that, right? There's always going to be a way to get around everything. It's just like the drinking age is 21. I can't imagine anyone under 21 in college ever having a drink because the drinking age is 21. So there's always ways people can work around, but you have mechanisms in place to create friction and do your best. And when you have something that is addictive, like tobacco or alcohol or gambling or AI companions and chatbots and screens and social media, there is a means and a reason to ensure that underage people are not accessing those because they're in a part of their development that makes them more vulnerable to these addictions.
Yeah, and we should point out, Rick, there are studies that a child, a teen, anybody can become truly addicted
Oh,
to
absolutely.
social media. There have even been these social media camps where parents are sending their kids to, unplug and really preying on the vulnerabilities, especially if you have any kind of underlying mental health issues. That's where these chatbots also come in. And we have to point out somebody said to me, oh, they're like a digital friend. I said, they're machines. They're not, they're giving out, health advice, medical advice. They're giving out emotional. They're not psychiatrists. They're not medical doctors. They're machines. So I keep saying they're machines to drive it home so people understand. Recently, something
Well,
very just, what would you
I
say
was
about
just going
that?
to say, well, because one of the things that people don't understand is that the way these systems are designed is to release dopamine in the brain, which
Yeah.
is the same thing that fentanyl does. Any drugs, it creates a high, an initial, and you want it more and more. How do you tell when somebody's addicted to something? Take it away from them. See what their reactions are. Like if you take away drugs from someone who's a drug addict, they freak out. Give me my drugs. You don't know, who are you? You take away alcohol from someone who's an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. Give me my alcohol. I'm fine. I can handle it. You do cigarettes as well, right? What are the withdrawals? Take away a teen's phone. If you have a teen, take away their phone for a day, for 2 days, for a week. If they are reacting in a way like a drug addict reacts to taking away their drugs, they're addicted. It's as simple as that because they are addicted, and not just teens, but even adults.
Everybody.
And so it's so obvious, but the evidence now is pointing to exactly the other thing to realize about the screen addiction is that the recent studies on the educational, mathematics and reading have dropped dramatically since 2011, since the iPhone was introduced. And part of it, you try to think of, well, there was COVID and that had an impact. But the studies are showing that even after COVID, especially for minority communities, their reading scores and their math scores are in a complete downslide because the attention spans aren't there. And so we have an addiction at all levels that is basically an epidemic that is out there that we need to address and explain to folks that, just because you love your iPhone or you love your coffee in the morning, it doesn't mean that you're not addicted to it. And so we just have to make sure that parents understand that cell phones and social media and now the power of AI companions are digital fentanyl. And you're giving your kids and you're allowing your kids digital fentanyl.
Yeah. And I think, Rick, that's really the rallying cry to make that analogy. That is something, we have to give something easy that the public can kind of understand, right? Because they're so overwhelmed these days with everything going on. That's a great analogy. I was here in New York, wonderful presentation with Jonathan Haidt, author of The Anxious Generation. And I recommend that as a read for everybody because his PowerPoint presentation pointed out the birth of the iPhone is when, with kids, the direct correlation of everything going south is directly, and he's got all these studies and stats, and we base everything on our studies and stats. We're not just talking, shooting our mouths off. This is true, everything that's happening. I want to talk about this.
One thing, I was at a heritage event yesterday where Jonathan spoke.
Okay, good.
And his presentation is amazing. But one of the other things that is really interesting, especially like on Capitol Hill, when I used to go up, 7-10 years ago, and talk to staffers, they were still enthralled by the technology side, what was happening on social media and things, the MySpace generation, I like to call it. But now when I talk to staffers who are in their early 20s, which tend to be 23, 20 to 30, when you talk to them, they say, my little brother's addicted. Like we were losing our family members. And so it's really interesting that this young staffers who back in, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, were all gung ho. You don't know what you're talking about because you don't understand technology, which I always laughed about since I, created technology companies. But the staffers are responding. They realize it. They see it in theirs, and the teenagers in colleges that are reaching out saying, we're seeing it with our friends and trying to get back their lives. And I think that's very hopeful.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Rick. We work here with the HEAT initiative, and a lot of young people are at the table and they are angry that they have been used as guinea pigs, and they're trying to wake up society. And also, as you pointed out, for the younger generation, they don't want their siblings or any other young kids and the parents to go through this like nobody knew, right? It was just thrown at everybody. But now we know. So I'm very proud of them because I really think it's the younger generations. I can talk until I'm whatever, blue in the face, but we need other, young people talking to young people for it to really resonate, kind of thing. At least I feel that. And I'm glad about, I'm glad about the Hill, but I also have a feeling sometimes when I walk into an office, because there's been so much negativity around maybe tech and all this stuff. It's almost like they get a little scared. And maybe, Rick, it's just me. When I walk in the office, I scare them. I don't know. But I'm glad you're reporting that because it is so necessary. But I want to talk about this issue 1, a deep dive that was done recently about how much money is being spent, just so the public understands, our warriors understand what's really going on the Hill. I'll just use one fact. When it was reported that Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads, Messenger, I believe, they have one lobbyist for every 6 members of Congress, which equals 87 lobbyists. How do you want to respond to that? It's for me, it tells me they're scared. And so they're going to just keep pouring a lot of money in to fight everything. But what do you say about that? The amounts of money, because this is supposed to be what, $100 million, I think we heard, has been spent in the past year, more money than any other time with 7 big tech companies. How do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, as one who was a former corporate lobbyist for a Fortune 50 company, we always used to laugh because the telecommunications companies used to have more. I used to say I'd go into every meeting I'd go into, I would see a different AT&T lobbyist or Verizon lobbyist, and I was just like by myself.
Mm,
So numbers don't matter as much. It's the message, and that's really more important. They are dumping a ton of money because they have to, right? They're trying to bolster their arguments. But if you're, the when you're a lobbyist, what you basically are selling is policy. You're trying to convince a member of Congress to support a policy that you're promoting. And it doesn't matter how many salespeople you have, but if the product is a bad product, they're not going to buy it, no matter how close they are to you. Because if we have our people going up, people like you and other advocates going up with the evidence and showing the real harms, our product, our policy is far better and easier for a member to buy than having one lobbyist lobbying 7 members of Congress with a bad product. And right now they have a bad product. And so let them spend as much money as they want. I have a lot of friends who are lobbyists for the other side, and they're doing very well, and I'm very happy for them. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what is going to get a member reelected is not that they help big tech harm our children, but they rose to the occasion to enact legislation to protect a whole generation from the harm of big tech. And so we just need to keep pushing. The crypto industry has a super PAC, couple super PACs that are going to pour in $264 million, $250 million into this 2026 election. You have Net Choice and the Chamber of Progress teaming up to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns around AI policy issues. So what we have to do, we can't compete with that. We don't have those resources. But what we do have is something that they don't, is voters in the district. And what I try to explain to people all the time is that if I'm running for a congressional seat, would I rather have a 10-person fundraiser and they each give me, the maximum of $5,000, right? Or would I rather have a 20,000 person fundraiser and they each give me $1? I'd rather have the 20,000 fundraiser in my district, 20,000 people fundraiser in my district, each give me $1, because I know those 20,000 people are going to vote for me, and they're going to tell their friends that they're going to vote for me. And that's what makes the difference in an election. Who is getting every commercial you see on television, which we've seen a lot lately, especially in the New York area, in New Jersey area. The whole goal of that is to get people in the voting booth to vote for you, or to discourage other people from voting against you, right? I don't like either candidate, and then using grassroots to get people in. We have that power right now to get people motivated, and for members of Congress to begin paying attention to who is going into the voting booth. And no matter how much money they spend on lobbying, it doesn't matter, because if it was all about money, it would be President Bloomberg. Think about how much Michael Bloomberg spent in Florida. I think it was like $100 million or something like that for a primary. He lost in Florida. I mean, so it's not just money. It's who's going into the voting booth. And that's what we have to focus on. That's what we have to rally on. We have to go into these congressional offices, in the districts, in Washington, D.C., do all the work that has been going on, raise awareness, and make these members of Congress defend themselves of why they're not supporting the AI Lead Act, the No Fakes Act, the Guard Act, COSA, and Sunsetting 230. Why are they doing that and for who? And they're not doing it for the constituents because the constituents want this legislation.
And a reminder, they work for us. I just want
They
to,
do.
those are my words, Rick. I'm throwing that in. They work for us. Let's finish up. You touched on, I like what you just said because people will always say to me, like, what can we do? So for warriors across the country listening, Rick, they'll always say, you know, my email won't matter, my phone call won't matter, but we have to keep pressure on Washington, or we have to keep pressure, you know, on our cities, our states. Tell us your feelings. How do we make sure uh, we keep impacting our elected representatives and have a real cultural shift in this digital age, which is this just new thing we're in? You know, we're here. We're in the middle of all this. What would you like to say about this?
It does matter. You know, if you really want to read a great book about lobbying and grassroots, there's two now. The first one I always talk about is Dr. Seuss, Horton Hears a Who. It's the best book about grassroots lobbying because every voice matters, right? And it takes everybody, chiming in to make a policy difference. The other book, if you really want to get deep into how Washington works, is The Wolves of K Street. And it is an excellent book by Brody Mullins and his brother. And Brody is won the Pulitzer Prize for reporting back. He's a great guy. I'm actually in the book, and I'll tell you why I'm in the book. I was working on legislation, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and we were winning every vote. It basically said that if a website is engaged in stealing intellectual property, movies, right, and illegally streaming them, that we could have legal action against them because we have legal action against companies in the US, but if they're based overseas, we couldn't touch them, right? If they're based in Russia or Iran and they're streaming movies illegally in the US, we can't shut them down. But what we can do is stop them, US citizens from getting access to them, right? We can stop payment processing. We can stop it showing up in search engines. That's what the legislation did. So if US law could not reach them, this provided us the ability to protect our intellectual property against overseas threats. We were winning because the policy was right. It's now this type of policy is in 23 countries where they allow this to all happen and the internet hasn't broken. But the other side had a power that we did not, which was the internet. And so they basically scared people into writing in and contacting members of Congress. And we ended up getting, the bill was going to be on the floor, and we ended up members backing away because they were scared because all the calls. And so I called one office and I said, you can't get off this bill. This is so important to the future of our intellectual property theft in this country, stopping it. And they said, Rick, we're getting calls 1,000 to 1 in our offices. And he said, and you're the one. And even though we were right on policy, they were able to mobilize the grassroots of the internet back in, again, this is like 2009, somewhere around there. And what I took away from that, and what we saw with the TikTok divestiture bill, is that these companies have the power of grassroots, but now so do we. And all those calls coming in on this legislation to members of Congress saying that we need this or rallying around on the district offices, that is our power. That is our superpower. And we need to utilize that.
Yeah. Rick, let's finish up with thoughts on TikTok, because I've lost track of delays and this and that. China's going to be on the board. What are you hearing that you want to share with us about TikTok? Supposedly today there may be an announcement. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we're all waiting for the announcement. As I've said publicly, what the president has done and the delays is illegal. It's, you had to have the Justice Department send letters to the general counsels of Google and Apple and other companies out there, Oracle, basically say, we will not prosecute you. We will not hold you accountable for breaking the law. I mean, that's to me insane and crazy. So the delays are not part of the legislation. There was a 90-day delay if there was a deal already on the table to paper it, as we like to say in the business world, to finish the deal up, not just to create all these delays. So my view, what he's doing, even though it's an executive order, is illegal and unconstitutional. But no one's willing to challenge that. But the real key will come down to the language in any TikTok deal, because the two things, very simple to understand the TikTok deal. The divestiture, the goal of the divestiture is to take the power of the algorithm out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party and the underlying source code. Because think about it from this perspective. They have all our data anyway. So it's not about protecting us from stealing our data. They have all of our stuff already. Just they're scraping, Instagram, they're scraping everything. They're hacking into our systems. They've hacked into our government systems. They've hacked into our telecommunication systems and been getting data. That's already done for the most part. They're not going to get that much. What they get from TikTok is human interaction and the ability to control. So think of data like bullets and the app as the gun. What we have to make sure is, and the algorithm as the gun. And if we don't have control of the algorithm and they control the gun, they can fire it at us at any time during a geopolitical crisis. So think about this. They have 170 million users. If they were able to convince 10% to go and protest in the streets and shut down different military bases and do whatever they can, that is 17 million people. If they did 1%, that's 1.7 million people in cities to create chaos that they control. So it would be like saying to China, you can store your nuclear weapons in Texas because now they're on our land. That's what they're Project Technique, store your data, but you still control the nuclear codes. We would never do that. And that's what we have to focus on with this deal. If the deal is a licensing deal of the TikTok algorithm and all it is money is now going to go to the new owners of TikTok US, but the algorithm and the source code are licensed from ByteDance and still in essence controlled by ByteDance and the CCP, this is a violation of the divestiture law and also a national security threat. So this is where we can come full circle. We talked about AI companions. Think about AI companions based out of TikTok that are in all of our kids' hands right now, and the impact that could have on the U.S. national security and the harm that it could cause to our children. And that's where we are. We need to ensure that we have controls over the AI companions in a sense to make sure that they're not harming our children, that there is age verification. And at the same time, we have to make sure that foreign adversaries are not using these powerful technological tools to undermine our democracy.
That is a great finish, Rick, because people have to really understand it's not about cute dances on TikTok. No. And this really is a national security threat. That's for another program, but it's a very dark, deep kind of, which we've already seen a lot of repercussions about all of this. Well, Rick Lane, I could talk to you forever, so promise me that you will come back in the near future because you remind us the digital world is really not a playground. It's kind of a battlefield. And you have shown us all information about policies, how they can shape the minds and safety of our children, our precious kids, our future American adults, our future leaders. But knowledge without action, Rick, means nothing. So that's where the warriors and you, Rick Lane, where we all come in as parents, teachers, grandparents, law enforcement, just all of us to fight all of this. And we have to refuse to look away. And prevention begins with awareness. We're always about prevention and intervention about all of this. So together we have to become, Rick, I really believe this firewall. All of our warriors out there, we can and must all do something. And if you share this video, that is enough. It's about information, sharing information, and always talk to your kids open and honestly, age appropriate, however you see fit. If you're a parent or a grandparent out there, because protecting kids, I think Rick, you'll agree with me, it isn't just a policy. It's a promise that we need to do this and stand up for our children. So thank you, Rick, for sharing your voice, your
Thank you.
expertise. Warriors, please follow Rick on LinkedIn. Rick, promise me you'll come back. I'm going to hold you to it. And I want to say, Rick, you really are. You've been with me actually from the beginning. We go back a little bit. I've got some other media stuff coming up. You are at the forefront, a leader with policy and explaining.
Thank
I want
you.
to thank you for that. And I want to call you our tech warrior. That is you, Rick Lane. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Rick.